welcome here, first of all, Thide, the head of the Repression Prison Committee of International PEN, and Romana Caccioli, the executive director of PEN International, and of course all members of PEN family from all around the world that have came here to Zagreb, even those that have been to the last minute in expectation of the visa, but they managed to join us here at the Academy of Dramatic Arts, which is Croatian's oldest foundation for performing and dramatic arts, founded in 1997 in Zagreb. As many of you, I think you don't know, Croatian PEN has been founded in 1927. It was like in the Zagreb club, PEN club, and that have kept together in the one bar was called City Basement, to keep together writers, artists of different perspectives and views, but all joined together for achievement of freedom of thought, of freedom of individual, freedom of the free person, free thinking human, to create in peace and freedom, which is the most important thing in the world. So the first note about the Croatian PEN or the Zagreb PEN Club was written in the Zagreb newspaper daily that was called Word, and it is also in the logo of our conference that we have. And this magazine have noted some of the perspectives that we keep to this day in PEN, but also as we are now to open and read the conference of the Writers in Prison Committee, which is one of the unique and most cherished committees of PEN International, since it embraces something that is most valuable, the freedom of the person. So many embraces the persons that are at risk or that are imprisoned somewhere in the world, given numbers, not their names, erased identities instead of dignity and freedom. And this committee here gathers now after a few years, I mean 3 or 4, the last gathering was in Rotterdam Harbor. And what I can also read and have a special thanks to the Minister of Culture and Media that is supporting our work all through the years, and to the Minister of Culture and Media, Nina Obuljen Koržinek, who is with us. Thank her for that. Thank you for being here. She's, if you don't know, she's from Dubrovnik, and for the PEN International history, there were 2 congresses, very important, that were held in Dubrovnik. One was in 1933, which stood against the rise of Nazism and also the burning of the books in Germany. And other one in 1993, also in Dubrovnik. It was in the time that still almost one third of Croatia was occupied, and Croatia was yet to achieve its full freedom during the great Serbian aggression in the 90s. So first I will ask our Minister, Nina Obuljen, to greet this assembly, please.
Thank you very much for this words of introduction, and thank you for inviting me to be with you here today. I would like to greet all members of PEN Committee for Writers in Prison, and as I understand, other members of PEN International who joined this meeting. As I understand, since 60s, when you started discussing the topic of the writers in prison, you have been gathering on a regular basis, and I think at the beginning I can only express something that everybody feels, and that is a regret that you still have to meet on this topic. I guess this is something that goes without saying, and this is something that many of us would think that in the world, in the 21st century, it is with much regret. It is not with much regret that you are here and that you are meeting, but it is with much regret that this is a topic of international discussion. History shows us that even in the darkest times, in the times of oppression and war, it was never possible to silence artists, writers and others. And we are here, and you are here, not only to discuss the situation around the world, but also always to show solidarity to those brave and courageous individuals who were ready to sacrifice their freedom for a greater good and for fighting for the freedom of expression. I have to say that today I'm a Minister of Culture and Media, but in my previous life I used to work as a researcher and international consultant, and I'm very proud that I was on the panel of the UN Special Envoy for Cultural Rights in the year where we were discussing the freedom of expression. It was, I can't now remember the year when it was exactly, sometime 2012 and 13, but it was an opportunity to learn not only about writers but about other creators and other artists who were for different reasons and in different ways prohibited from the freedom of expression. And as our societies evolve, fortunately or unfortunately, even those who get to a certain level of development, I think we can never be careful enough, because the rights and freedoms are concepts and values that need to be defended all the time, and we always have to be vigilant, because unfortunately we see in the history that it's very easy to lose some freedoms that we take for granted. We see it in the example of today's brutal aggression of Russia on Ukraine, which is a war danger, a similar situation that we lived through 30 years ago and that Tomice Bajsića has evoked. But we see also in many parts of the world that there are different kind of crises and different kind of totalitarian or extreme movements that are gaining power, and that freedom of expression is endangered, even in places and countries where we might not think that this would ever again be the case. The same is with the technology that brought us many positive developments, but also the phenomena of fake news and everything that is happening in and around virtual world is in many aspects creating huge danger for the freedom of expression and for our democracies. Prior to coming up at this stage, Iva Marojević told me something that I would like to share with you, because this is something that I was thinking about coming here, was the fact that we are lucky that we are hosting this meeting in Zagreb, in Croatia today, when there are no artists in prison and there are no writers in prisons, and there is no danger for the freedom of expression. But this was not the case only several decades ago. We still remember very vividly during the times of communism, where many people were prohibited from expressing themselves, not only politically but also artists of different kinds. So with these words, I would like to wish you a very fruitful discussions. I would like to join you in sharing, I'm sure, your emotions of all of these faces that we see here in this room. Behind these faces are your colleagues who are at this very moment in prison in different parts of the world. What we can do is, in other parts of the world for them, is to speak about them, translate their books, promote their work, and show solidarity, and of course, for us politicians, work on the political level and make attempts and endeavors like yours as visible as possible. With these words, I wish you very fruitful discussions, and I hope that your stay in Croatia will be pleasant, and that, of course, you will come up with some new ideas or renewed ideas how we all together can do as much as we can to fight for those who unfortunately cannot fight for themselves. Thank you very much.
I will ask our chairperson from Myanmar, Thide, please.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. And I'm really honored to be here. And to be frank, I was not here. I was not sure whether I can come here or not, because I'm in the difficult situation with my passport extension. So luckily I was in Berlin, that's why it's not much problem for me come here with the very limited passport validity yet. But the process is still going on at the Myanmar Embassy in Berlin. So I just want to say I can totally empathy and understand how the people either writers at risk or writer in prison, because I myself was in prison for 5 years, 6 months in early 1990s. So, yeah. First of all, I really like to express my deep gratitude towards Tomice Bajsića. You are the one who made this happen. Yeah, we met in Berlin when I arrived in Berlin last June, and as soon as I was there, and he was there for the other international poetry festival. So we met and we talked, and then we brainstormed, and then this the product of our conversation, I think. Yeah, because it was 4 years already. We because of the coronavirus pandemic, the last in-person writer in prison annual meeting was held jointly with ICONT in 2019 in Rotterdam. So 4 years onward, finally here in Zagreb, PEN International Writers in Prison Committee is once again able to organize the annual meeting in in-person format for delegates and guests to meet and exchange ideas to free the world of war in times of war and repression. Sincere congratulations to PEN Croatia, PEN International, and all the dedicated volunteers and supporters. As well, my profound gratitude also goes to the Croatia Ministry of Culture and Media, our PEN International Secretary team, and our writer in prison committee, steering committee members, and every single members of our PEN International. Our collective efforts have resulted in this 2023 hybrid in-person and online meeting. Even though there are so many constraints such as funding and political sensitivity during this time of war and repression on the global stage, WiPC, Writer in Prison Committee, is trying to contribute to free the wards and hopefully to help steering the war towards a peaceful direction. In recent years, it has been really very stressful for many of us as global citizens. Wars and repressions are almost at every corner of the globe, or on countless pages of our digital sphere. In this dire situation, writers, activists, and global citizens who believe in free speech are often facing surveillance, discrimination, threats, legal and judicial harassments, and many also suffer from the complete lack of access to freedom. We need freedom, we demand, and we are fighting for freedom in all essential manners, including the expression of our written words. The freedom of our words is intrinsically linked to the freedom of this war. If the war itself is not free, we are not free, we will be not free. Consequently, our words and work will not be free. Observing the war, we see worrying trends emerging across the globe. In 2022, at least 277 writers in 36 countries were locked behind bars, and countless others faced many forms of harassment. Our case list records reports at least 68 writers and journalists killed or threatened, mostly in the Americas, Europe, Asia Pacific, and the Middle East. The culprits are repressing governments and non-state actors in territories controlled by armed gangs acting with impunity and corruption. Restricted legislations from criminal defamation to so-called anti-fake news legislation are being applied to criminalize free speeches and silence writers and journalists. The use of surveillance technology has a particularly chilling effect on writers, journalists, and human rights defenders, whose liberty and safety are adversely affected, and the confidentiality of their sources is constantly threatened. Across all regions of the globe, from Bahrain, Bangladesh, Belarus, China, India, Iraq, Iran, Kuwait, Morocco, Myanmar, to Oman, Saudi Arabia, Spain, Sri Lanka, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates, the United Kingdom, and Vietnam. Writers, journalists, and publishers continue to be harassed, arrested, detained, and in many cases sentenced to lengthy prison terms on vaguely worded charges allegedly linked to national security risks. A clear example is from my own country, Myanmar. On 13 April 2023, Tomice, a reporter and editor in Yangon, was arrested by the military junta right after he changed his profile picture on his social media account to a black square as an expression of mourning for the victims of the junta's violent airstrike attack on a village in the Thide region, causing the deaths of at least 165 people, including many women and children. The space in which civil society operates is continuously shrinking, with rights groups and members of the political oppositions being attacked, harassed, threatened, and killed for their legitimate expressions of dissent, criticisms of government actions, and calls for accountability. Repressive old and new laws have also forced several PEN centers to close down or to continue their works underground or in exile. Penal charges, including criminal defamation and lèse majesté laws, are also used against activists in many countries, like Belarus, Guatemala, the Russian Federation, Morocco, Italy, Egypt, Malaysia, Peru, and Turkey. The justice systems are being abused to control and eliminate dissenting voices, resulting in state-sponsored impunity. Many writers and journalists were judicially harassed with multiple or repeated lawsuits, especially by government officials, for their investigative reporting or commentary on social issues. Restrictions on the opportunities available to learn and to receive education in minority languages and forced assimilation, particularly in countries in the Asia-Pacific region, have devastating consequences on education and language rights. Discrimination against minorities is an easy scapegoat strategy when governments wish to create distractions from ongoing political and economic turmoil. And in some countries, this strategy has reached level of persecution amounting to crimes against humanity. For example, Uyghur writers and journalists are among the thousands of victims of state's repression in China's Xinjiang region. The fate of Uyghur academic Rahid Awul, held in secret detention since 2017, remains unknown. In Tibet, with a number of writers serving long prison terms for defending their cultural rights, official methods of cultural assimilation are gradually eroding the Tibetan mother tongue education. In Turkey, since the breakdown of the peace process between the Turkish authorities and the Kurdish Workers' Party in July 2015, the authorities have repeatedly cracked down on Kurdish literary and cultural symbols, language, and media outlets. In Myanmar, in my own country, amendments to the education system reflect the military junta's brutal efforts to undermine the country's rich linguistic diversity in areas under its control by seeking to promote the use of Burmese language to the detriment of other ethnic languages. In India, anti-caste activists advocating for the rights of Dalits and the other marginalized communities are detained pending trial in poor condition that gives rise to fears for their health and safety. And women writers all over the world continue to be disproportionately silenced, both online and offline, through censorship, harassment, or violence. Official impunity emboldens perpetrators, and unchecked abuses and authoritarian rule only lead to greater violation and sufferings. Writer in Prison Committee is one of the essential counterforces to persecutory impunity. The Writer in Prison Committee, WiPC of PEN International, was established in 1960 to assist persecuted writers and journalists in response to autocratic government's attempts to silence voices of dissent. WiPC monitors many cases across the globe and produces the yearly case list and mobilizes the PEN Center's network and wider community to take action to protect persecuted writers and journalists through its Rapid Action Network alerts, targeted regional campaigns, and by utilizing PEN's consultative status at the United Nations to submit country and thematic reports. We also try as much as we could to protect and relocate writers and their family members and to preserve their works, including their status. At this 2023 annual meeting, we will discuss key thematic challenges, including the challenges faced by displaced writers and posting centers, criminal defamation, digital dictatorship, and access to freedom. Due to financial and other constraints, we know that our works are still insufficient to meet the valid demands of writers at risk from all over the world and to mend consequential damages in the era of wars and repression. Our unified message to the international community is unequivocally clear. States must do everything in their power to reduce and eliminate all abuses by developing and implementing bolder and better coordinated responses, and ensuring utmost respect for human rights as foundation for peaceful, open and just societies. During this 2023 annual meeting, WiPC is honoring 7 writers as our empty chairs cases. They are Rwanda poet Innocence Bahati, Hong Kong Chinese writer, publisher and activist Jimmy Lai, Iranian teacher and prominent poet Marfesh Savet, Cuban musician and rapper Miguel Castillo, Turkish publisher, civil and cultural rights activist and philanthropist Osman Kavala, Peruvian investigative journalist and author Paulo Lucas, and Crimean Tatar citizens journalist and human rights defender Sava Mustafaya. As well, I am pleased to announce that PEN Canada has recently adopted Egyptian-British blogger Ala Abd El-Fattah and Turkish human rights defender Narges Mohammadi as honorary members. Solidarity is one of our biggest strengths. In the 1990s, while I was in prisons in Myanmar, my case was mentioned as part of the empty chair honoring process. Upon learning that the war did not forget me, I was grateful and my fighting spirits was uplifted significantly. The delegation of PEN membership is a continuous source of inspiration and motivation for all of us, especially for those whose liberty and freedom of expressions are severely restricted. From here, I wholeheartedly send my loving kindness, solidarity, and empathy to all fellow writers and human rights defenders who are currently in prisons or at risk. I just want to say that each and every one of you is not now and will never be alone, because we are all together in the fight to free the wards. Let us stand together to free the wards and to make the world a better place for all of us. Thank you so much. And I would like to welcome Ross Holder, Asia Pacific Coordinator of our PEN International Secretary team, to present the case of the Jimmy Lai. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Thide, the Writers in Prison Committee, and Godišnji PEN for the opportunity to present Jimmy Lai's, our first empty chair at the annual meeting. Jimmy Lai is a writer, publisher, and activist with UK citizenship who has been continuously in prison since December 2020, following his initial detention in August 2020 on multiple charges for his journalism and activism. Jimmy Lai has already received several convictions of unauthorized assembly for his participation in peaceful pro-democracy protests, including a 13-month sentence for briefly appearing at a vigil to commemorate the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. On the 10th of December 2022, on Human Rights Day, Jimmy Lai was sentenced to a total of 5 years and 9 months imprisonment for violating the terms of a commercial lease. Jimmy Lai faces further charges under the National Security Law, which could result in a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. The owner of Apple Daily, Hong Kong's longest and largest pro-democracy news outlet, before it was forced to close by the authorities, Lai's ongoing detention is emblematic of the national security law's devastating impact on freedom of expression across Hong Kong, and is illustrative of the authorities' willingness to weaponize the legal system and use it to stifle dissenting voices. Thank you. I'd like to now invite our first panelists for the ranking.
I'm going to be the master of ceremony for the rest of the program tonight. So I'm very glad to invite some of the colleagues with fascinating biographies and with plenty of terrible situations that they can share with us with their personal experience. And we can talk about literature in times of war and repression tonight. I'll be your moderator. I'm Sibila Petlevski, and I'm going to talk with Thide, whom you already met right now, and Herman Rojas, and Catherine Bisquet Rodriguez, and Firas Shamsur. I would like them to come to the stage. So today we are going to speak about the role of the importance of literary creation and freedom of expression in turbulent times. I have thought about the dramaturgy of this event so that we can pose questions to each other, and I'm going to lead you through this discussion. And the first speech, perhaps, I don't know, maybe we could speak right now, because we have heard the introduction, and I'm going to give a little bit of your biography, because Thide is a medical doctor, writer, human rights activist, and former prisoner of conscience. She edits magazines, she is a volunteer of a local free clinic, and she was sentenced, as she said, to 20 years in prison for, I've sat now, endangering public peace, having contact with illegal organizations, and distributing unlawful literature. Could you comment on this? Because we know that even now the situation, as you mentioned, is stable but not really convenient for a free-thinking person. So could you comment on these charges and tell us a little bit more about your personal experiences? I have seen some of the interviews with you, and I was really touched to the heart with what you have said. So could you please tell us a little bit more about your own experience as a free-speaking person who tries to survive the severe circumstances and be free in heart all the time?
Thank you. I think I had so many things to tell, but first of all, I just used to say freedom is never been by chance, it's by choice. So I always choose freedom, even though I were in prison. So it's very hard. When I talk about this, sometimes there will be no chance to choose freedom by ourselves. But still, especially for the writers, there is the way to choose freedom. Because, of course, we are writers. That's what I believe. Only to get published will be restrictions, but to write freely, to think freely, to present freely is our choice. It cannot be banned. Yeah, even when we want to publish our free works, it will be the problem. Or even only when we want to keep our free speech, that will be the problem. We cannot afford to give up our free speech, even though we might give up our freedom, physical freedom, or freedom to move, something like that. Now I'm facing this kind of the, even though my physical, I'm not in jail, I'm not in prison, my physical freedom is pretty much guaranteed, but of course I'm not free. In terms of my heart is still in Myanmar, and so something, but when I write, only as a person restrictions can be applied, but when I write, when I practice my own free speech and free writings, freedom came back to me. That's what I believe, That's why it's very important for us to keep ourselves in total freedom and to share our freedom of words and thoughts to the others. That's very important. In this case, I always prefer literature rather than the journalism, to be frank. Literature is more to the humanity, human value, or the human feeling. That's why it's pretty much long-lasting, for the news, headline news, or any data and facts. It won't last for a longer term, but for our stories telling and our opinions sharing, it will last longer, and it came from the bottom of our heart. That's why it can reach out to the other people's heart easily. So for that reason, if we want to save the words from the writers, we need to save writers, of course. So that's why it's like very important for us to do this job as a pen. Yeah.
Thank you so much. The same question to you. Firas Shamsan is a journalist, photographer, blogger, peace activist. He's a Yemeni journalist. And he started working as a journalist in Yemen in 2008 after taking part in Arab Spring demonstrations that resulted in the overthrow of the president, and he focused on political and social reporting. But on the other hand, he participated in a range of other campaigns in which he highlighted the importance of literature. And that's the first question to you. Please tell us more about your experiences as a person who tried to promote young authors in the most severe circumstances in your country.
Thank you very much. First, I'm really happy to visit Croatia at this time. So, I'm really happy to be here. I just came by the bus, so yeah. I'm really happy to be here today, to be here and speaking about the experience, speaking about freedom. As a journalist, as a writer, when we talk about freedom, we have something, I will say it in Arabic, which means نقول ما نشاء ننام بلا عشاء, which means you say what you want, you sleep hungry. So, what is happening to be a writer or journalist? When I was writing and when I was publishing about political things, it was fine. But then when I started to write about art and culture, it was worse. I've been present from a book fair. I've been tortured from a book fair. More things was happening when we talk about making a change, and we talk about making a really activity. What we want to do is first to know where we are. And what you notice is the media is actually focusing about political actions, political people, but what about art and culture? What about writers? To be a journalist, to be a writer, you are really in very, very, very bad situation. Economically, culturally, the position, people will not be happy to react with you. They will be always afraid even to write or read about what you are doing. And then you will be also afraid. So, the things we did in 2011, when I participated at the beginning, and then I become part of it as well, I noticed there is really thing is missing. It is culture. So if we talk about peace, peace is a culture. It's a culture of peace. How to be peaceful. It's reading about, understanding the situation. So then I start something called fun time. Fun in Arabic, it's art, and the time of art. And I start to focus about just the people in the scratch. Is just the beginning. We start to make videos about them, we start to talk about them, we start reporting about how good that this was actually the opposite. Imagine to be a gang member or like radical members. You didn't see any gang member or like people from ISIS or whatever these names of these crazy groups, never asking for help. But in the International Day of Youth, we put a signs about giving hope for young people, they cut it from the street. So why always art and culture, why always writers being chased? But when you talk about the people who have guns, who have weapons, no one is asking them a question. You will not ask someone with AK-47, what are you doing? But it's easy to say to someone writing something, oh, I don't like it. So this is the part we have to understand how we can make action in peace, not just in our experience in jail, and like when you be in jail with other criminals. One of the criminals, he was asking, what are you doing here? He said, I'm a drug dealer, but what are you doing here? He was like confused. So what we need to do actually is to take all this experience, and yeah, it was bad, it was torture, it was really hard time, but then what we learn from it, and what we can tell the people, stop doing that. This is how we develop as human. This is what we need more, and we need people more to read and write, freedom of experience. It's nothing. They are not scary. Writers are not scary.
So I would just like to ask you something more, because in one interview that I've listened to, you mentioned the first experience of shock that you have when you've seen a man who was expelled from the hospital. He was injured, he had AIDS, and then you just had this enormous shock, and you wanted to do something. So my question is, what is the difference of activism in literary circles and in PEN International and other activistic organizations, because you also had the experience with other organizations, and that would be also the question for all of you. And then I think that we will go in rounds with different questions and what you have prepared and the colleague has prepared as well. But please.
Yeah, shortly the case, I was like in the Tomice Bajsića hospital in Sana'a, which this man, he had HIV positive, and he was like asylum seeker from African country, and literally someone take him and drop him in the hospital and run away. So the people who's supposed to be doctors inside the hospital, when they notice this guy have no one, literally they take him, he had AIDS, so everyone like was, ooh, he have HIV. Imagine this is the doctor, so they throw him outside. When I know about the story, when I start to write about it, so I feel like, okay, I'm just writing, this is personal life. And then we take an action. We not just write about it, we try to find, we don't understand this man, but his situation, no one can understand him. Even there was a lady came and people think he's begging, so they put money, and he was like the topless, like this, no shirt. And there was one lady came and she was stealing the money, and someone said, hey, you have AIDS, and she said, hey, she threw the money in like gross way. So this guy, when we take an action, we write, we bring people, they return him back to the hospital. Actually, it was really sad that he did after 2 days. I don't know what happened to him inside, but imagine if we don't speak about it. But the worse than this, it is like, that's even before 2011, but the worst, I want to the story of Mohammed Abdelhabsi. He's a colleague of mine, where they put a poison in his food because he was writing about corruption. There is many writers, there is many journalists, like 8 journalists have been in prison, now they just released. So imagine that last week we was with Mr. Ali Okrugli, where he gets the medal prize from the Ministry of French of Culture, and the lady, the minister, she was originally from Lebanon, the guy, he was originally from Yemen, and he get medal of honor. The both of them, in Yemen, he got threatened. His family was threatened because the book he wrote. So how we can go to the community and make them understand this art is not dangerous. When you go to a museum, you see art. When you go to the cities, you know, Victor Hugo, when we go to Brussels, we read what's happening to him, but you keep saying, oh, he was living here, this writer was living here. Never say, oh, this military leader was living here. Except if the military leader destroyed this city, they will mention him. So this is the ideas, like how we can give people respect to understand what it means, the value of writing, what it means, the value of freedom. So many examples around, but the time will not be. But I want to share with the others.
It was very valuable. Could you please, before what you have prepared for us, we also have a small video. Could you just answer the same question about the literary activism in literary circles and activism in other NGOs, or about your experience? Herman Rojas is from PEN Chile, and later I'll go an intro to your biography, but just first answer this question, please.
Yeah, I was not expecting to start with this question, but let me just give it a second for
Herman Rojas is a writer and poet from Santiago, Chile, and was elected in 2022 as chair of the Writers for Peace Committee. And my idea was also to make a bridge between these activities in the Peace Committee and the Writers in Prison Committee. And for many years, Rojas developed activities as a poet in Italy. He published plenty of books. He published his book, The Broken Tree, with a foreword written by Zurita, and obtained Chilean National Literature Prize. Rojas' poems have been also published in the anthologies in Chile, France, Honduras, Puerto Rico, and after the coup d'etat in Chile in 1973, he was imprisoned and then sent into exile in 1974, first to Norway and later to France. And from the 70s until 2017, he worked at the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, and he has a lot of experience, not only personally as a persecuted writer, but also working in different organizations that are trying to do some good in this world.
Thanks a lot, Sibila. Well, the first thing I would like to say is that when you are facing situations of war, which was not my case, but of internal repression, hard repression like the one I suffered in Chile in 1973 after the coup d'etat of Augusto Pinochet, the act of writing is certainly an individual, a personal decision. It's a personal need to write. But when time goes on and then you read what you have written and what other people have written in the same conditions that you were facing, you realize that literature is an act of humanity. You're representing through the things that you've written maybe the most precious values of humanity. In Chile, well, I was arrested 2 months after the coup, so I didn't have enough time to work on the clandestine work in Chile. However, I was a member of a party, a Christian party that was supporting Salvador Allende, and we started with some very simple clandestine papers, which was our idea of giving a message in a situation where you cannot say who you are. I brought here a couple of examples. These are papers that have 44 years already, and this was clandestine press that unfortunately, these are political ones. I say unfortunately because we also had literature written in the same system, but I gave those that I had to the Museum of Memory and Human Rights in Chile. This was a special edition. That's what we were using color in the mimeograph. This was not that easy to get it. And it's important to know the suffering, the fear of the people that was behind the preparation of this kind of things. And the fear of the people when they were distributing the things in the streets, on the labor side, on the universities, schools, etc. So they have a history of hardship that it's very important to remember and not to forget. So that's very, very, it expresses the importance of literature, and I would go on that after the video that I would like to say to you.
Would you like to continue now with what you have prepared with the insert, or we just go on with questions and then we come back to what you have prepared?
As you wish. Because I would like to hear too.
Okay, okay. So now I would need help from a colleague translator. Could Željka Lovrenčić please come to the stage? I'm going to introduce Catherine Biscay. She was born in Cuba. She's a writer and she's a multimedia producer. Graduated in Spanish language from University of Havana. Has published plenty of poetry books. Directed the film, a short documentary. Was an organizer and curator at the Biennale 2018 of Havana, and one of the barricaders and one of the strikers of San Isidro in 2020, becoming afterwards a human rights activist and a member of the group 27N. She published chronicles, poetry, interviews in magazines, newspapers, and she also had first-hand experience of the curb on her free speech and on her attempts to publish freely both her writings and her opinion in multimedia ways. So she has prepared something for us in Spanish, and a dear colleague of ours translated it into Croatian and into English. So we are going to listen to this first, and if you feel like talking more with us, I would be really, really glad, and I think that the audience would also appreciate a little discussion with you later.
Debería hablar sobre mi trayectoria como activista y mi labor ahora como escritora desplazada, luego de ser desterrada hace 2 años. Pero yo siempre prefiero hablar de las cosas que me impulsaron a tomar este camino dentro de la disidencia. Pues esas mismas cosas, esos acontecimientos, han sido ya no solamente el hilo por donde se ha entretejido mi vida, sino también por donde se ha tejido la vida de los síntomas de un país, de los familiares de cientos de presos políticos, de mis amigos presos, de millones de exiliados.
Hello, I'm Željka Lovrenčić, and I'm translator from Spanish to Croatian and from Croatian to Spanish, not to English. But I will try to translate these words, these beautiful words of our colleague from Cuba. I should talk about my trajectory as activist and about my work now as a writer, as displaced writer, after that I was in exile. But I always want more speak about the things that impulse me take decision and going to the way of dissidence, because these things, these occurrences, they are not only a young Provera interview my life, but they are something that intervene life of members of families of 100 persons in prisons, of my friends in prisons, and of millions of people living in exile.
Durante el tiempo que estuve...
¿Está claro? ¿Entienden? Do you understand? Okay.
Durante el tiempo que estuve en prisión domiciliaria, no se te oye. Durante el tiempo que estuve en prisión domiciliaria en Cuba, me hicieron una entrevista donde me preguntaron que cómo podía seguir trabajando bajo represión, bajo un clima de violencia diaria, a lo que respondí brevemente en aquel entonces que si dejaba de escribir, ganaban ellos. Ya me tienen a mí, trato de que no secuestren mi imaginación también.
During the time that I was at house arrest in Cuba, made me interview where asked me how could I continue under repression, how I could continue writing in a climate of violence of every day. And I said very shortly that if I stop to write, they will win, and they kidnapped me, but I don't want that they kidnap my imagination too.
La seguridad del Estado, en efecto, me mantuvo inmovilizada en mi propia casa por largos meses, pero esto no impidió que siguiera con mi trabajo, con la traducción de toda esa violencia a otro lenguaje, poesía, crónica, ficción. Era la única manera en la que podía escapar de allí, y toda esa violencia quedó sometida a un verso, sometida a la belleza y a la gravedad de un verso.
The security of state, indeed, they kept me in my house, immobilized, and I was there for a lot of months. But they don't not stop me. That I keep working. That I working in the translation to all this violence to another language, to poetry, to chronica, to fiction. It was the unique way that I can escape from there. And all this violence I subjected a verse, and I subjected to beauty and gravity of one verse.
Pero antes de que sucediera todo, antes de que el conflicto me alcanzara, la escritura no siempre fue suficiente para defenderme o para defender al resto. Dejé de poner la palabra para poner el cuerpo. Con el verso no me bastaba. La poesía se convirtió en una extensión de mi cuerpo, un arma de lucha en el espacio público. La acción performática de leer poesía en la vía pública, frente a una estación de policía, en las calles, a las puertas de las instituciones del gobierno, desde una azotea, se convirtieron en delitos a mi cuenta: instigación a delinquir, desacato, desorden público, incitación a la rebelión, sedición.
But before all this succeed, and before conflict reached me, the writing wasn't enough for defend me or for defend the rest of people. And I was stopped putting a word and I was putting a body because verse wasn't enough. Performance action of reading poetry in public life in front of police station, in the streets, at the doors of institution of government, and on rooftop, turn to my crimes indication to committee crime, to committee public distraction, rebellion, sedition.
Entonces ya no era la poesía publicada en las redes sociales o en un libro lo que representaba un peligro para la seguridad del Estado, sino mi activismo poético, la poesía protesta a modo de manifiesto en la vía pública. Estas acciones cobraban significado cuando cruzaban la línea delgada entre el activismo y el ejercicio de la escritura.
So, it was no longer publish poetry at networks or in one book, something that was represent danger to state security. It was my activity of poetry, the poetry of protest, the way of public manifest. And this Cooper meaning signified when I was crossing the thin line between activism and exercise of writing.
Muchos escritores aquí somos activistas, seguramente saben a lo que me refiero cuando se pasa del papel a la calle. La represión ya no está solamente en la censura de nuestra obra literaria, en el querer silenciarnos, en la persecución, en el exilio o en el propio incilio. La represión se manifiesta total, como cuando una plaga se propaga y no les basta con controlarla, tienen que exterminarla.
A lot of writers, we are activists, and we know when I said that I passed from paper to the street. Repression is not longer censure of our works, literary works, and desire of silence us, persecution, exilio, or own exilio. Repression manifests itself completely, like when the plague spreads, and it is not necessary to control it, it's necessary to exterminate it.
Mi escritura crítica fue en gran medida un buen conductor de empatía y de solidaridad. Pero realmente lo que logró mi libertad plena y mi capital político para generar un cambio real fue que yo misma me convirtiese en mi propia escritura. Fue de esa manera que pude hacer contacto con las otras personas que estaban en peligro, ya no verlos desde cierta distancia, desde donde inspiran a los poetas, sino desde el mismo suelo de la guerra, donde pude tocarlos y estar con ellos. Muchas gracias.
And my critical writing, to a large degree, was a good guide to empathy and solidarity, but really I achieved my full liberty, and this was the best, and my political capital, and I could generate change. I could generate change, and myself became my own writing. It was the manner that I could make contact with other person that had problems, and it was necessary. It wasn't necessary to look them from certain distance, from where poets inspired them, but from the very ground of the war. And there I could touch them and to be with them. Thank you.
So you mentioned two very important words for us. It's empathy and solidarity. And also the perspective of understanding others and helping others. And you mentioned your body as a vehicle of difference towards the circumstances in your country, because just the physical fact that you were there and that you were witnessing with your own body your resistance was enough. Even if you wouldn't be in a chance to speak, just your very existence being on the square, showing that you are against, is strong enough. Am I right? And what is now your, how you now establish yourself in a new circumstances, in a new country, and how you go back to your previous experience, and what is your type of activism at this very moment? Because now you are not in your country, and still you help others.
Lo que sucede, o sea, cuando yo tengo que tomar este cambio simbólico, o sea, con mi escritura y lo transformo en performance, se debe precisamente a una escalada en la violencia hacia la ciudadanía. O sea,
Znači, kad ona krene sa svojim performansom,
Just tell the entire phrase and then I'll try.
Yes, you are started with your performance. Y cuando empiezas con tus performances, ¿qué pasa?
O sea, lo que sucede, o sea, cuando tomo esta medida de cambio simbólico de pasar al performance, de pasar al activismo, es porque, o sea, hay un cambio, o sea, en la violencia, hay un crecimiento en esa violencia hacia la ciudadanía.
Znači, u njoj kao da raste nasilje, kao da se želi suprotstaviti na svoj način nasilju koje raste u međugrađanstvu.
So I think that the colleague says that the sort of violence, not really, when she starts with a performance, it's not really violence, but it's sort of an anger that brings up to the rim, and then it goes over, it spills over, and it catches the violence of the counter-violence that is coming towards you. Did I catch? Or maybe you could help us to translate it from Spanish into English. Now I have found out the solution, and you have to be the slave of this brilliant idea of mine.
For me, it will be a pleasure to translate for Catherine, and I want to express all my solidarity with your previous situation that you're facing in Cuba. And well, I wanted to say, I want to show a video that expressed. Is it possible to watch that?
Pablo Neruda, le plus grand poète chilien, est mort d'un cancer quelques jours après le putsch militaire. Son enterrement donne lieu à la première manifestation publique de fidélité à l'unité populaire. C'est sans doute la présence des journalistes, des caméras, qui a préservé les participants d'un massacre. Même les fascistes doivent tenir compte de l'opinion mondiale. Une leçon à ne pas oublier.
Well, first of all, I would like to apologize with some of you that maybe the song International has a different meaning and could have also symbol in some countries of repression. But in the case of Chile in 1973, when that film was shot, the song International had the meaning, was a symbol of liberty, of freedom, of justice. And this took place 13 days or 15 days after the book. 15 days after the bombing of the presidential palace. 15 days after repression everywhere. And this group of people, it was not a small group of people, was there demonstrating the support and the admiration for Pablo Neruda, our most famous writer, Chilean writer who won the Nobel Prize in 1931. This is a symbol, this short film, of the importance of literature. The people there were present because a man, Pablo Neruda, had written before. And because the poems and things that he wrote were known by the people. And they were expressing their reaction, they were defying the dictatorship in that moment. This is one thing it's important to understand, that literature has a role that goes well beyond a book, well beyond the words that we express through the things that we write. I'd like to, in this opportunity, also to mention another thing that is related to this. And I hope that Laura Minitegi is present here. I think, yeah. Hi, Laura. I would recall now a Spanish poet, which as a matter of fact is a Basque poet, Gabriel Zelaya. He was born in 1911, died in 1991, and he stayed in Spain during all the time of Franco's dictatorship. And Zelaya wrote a poem, maybe his most known poem, titled "Poetry is a weapon loaded with future." Poetry is a weapon loaded with future. Maldigo la poesía concebida como un lujo cultural por los neutrales, quien lavándose las manos se desentienden y evaden. Maldigo la poesía de aquellos que no toman partido hasta mancharse. In a lousy translation of that, this is something like, I curse poetry conceived as a cultural luxury by neutrals, who washing their hands, ignore and evade. I cause the poetry of those who do not take sides until they're stained. This is also important to express in a very powerful manner the role of literature when you're facing situation of repression or war. Because we normally, and well, at least that was my personal experience, that you were writing every day with the presence of death around. This possibility of that day or every day would be the last day in your life is something very, very hard. And I wrote to denounce. I wrote with a political intention. I wrote to express my feelings internally. I wrote about love, and I would like to recall here one poem I wrote. I don't have an English translation for that poem, but anyway, the story is significant of the situation which some of us have been facing for even the need of expressing yourself in writing. Because normally under hard conditions of repression in prison, you don't have a pen, you don't have a paper. So I was in an isolation cell, and I got from a guard who I assume he had some sympathy for our situation, and he gave me a pen. Big pen, red pen, very difficult to write, and I got a paper that we had inside the cell a can. That can was used in the programs of food assistance to schools with powdered milk, and those then the empty cans certainly were taken to jail. And since we don't have inside the cell a bathroom, those cans were supposed to be for basic needs. That can had a label, and that label I cut it, and I had on the other side the possibility of a white paper. And that was the paper is kuche, it's very not good for writing, but anyway, in that conditions I had all the time for doing it, so I took the time and wrote a poem with that. But then the problem was, well, and that poem, by the way, was on the occasion of the second anniversary of my marriage. I was 23 then. I said, well, I would write her this poem, okay, and I did it, and then in order to what to do with the paper and how to take that paper out of the jail, if I were said, well, I know that it's almost impossible because I had already suffered a mock execution, So I knew that where, you know, every day, as I told you before, was the last day. And then I wrote the poem and I put the paper inside my jacket, in the lining of my jacket, to hide it, because I knew when one was short, the clothes was given to the family. So I thought myself that maybe my family find the papers out there. But I was very fortunate. I'm here. And I left, after a time, the jail with a poem inside my jacket. And then outside, I rewrote it again in a better way. So I kept up to today. And it's part of my first book of poems, which is a love poems that I won a prize in Italy for that book, and I'm very proud of it. But that's an expression of the conditions in which people are supposed to be right. Those were the hardest time, because after many years, we had a dictatorship for 17 years. The situation changed, and it was possible to have paper. So that was the first period, which was the most difficult one. And I wanted to share this experience just for you to figure out what it means in concrete terms, the fact of being in jail without the possibility of expressing yourself, and using different tools for survival. I have another writing, I'm not going to read it here, but anyways, I made a chess game with the bread I received. I made the pieces, and I made myself chess games when I was home, just to fight against madness. So I think it's a way of expressing the best way I can do to express how is it possible to write despite everything in jail.
Thank you so much for this, that you shared it with us. And I think that some of you being here also had some experience of trying to think and write and keep your dignity in the prison. So first I'm going to ask you, and then the two of you, about this dignity and about the thing that kept you living and feeling and hoping, and the thing that made you angry enough to survive.
Wow, it's a hard question. Actually, when I was telling the story, and I know it's really hard, you know, when I was in the police station, you know, like it was so crowded, 63 something in a small place, and we was like this. I was there, and the things when you talk about smuggling paper, I remember the criminals, you know, like they put us with criminals, you know. I'd never been in prison in Yemen. Even one time, there was someone made something wrong in our house, he stole stuff, and I go, we put him in prison. Second day he came, he say hello, he paid money and he go out. That's corruption. But to be present outside of your country, you know no one, and then every time they will say something else about you, and you are some. And when I was in jail, I was talking with Miss Alex today, and I remember this scene where I talk about, like, if you are a writer, you will struggle in jail. One of the famous prisoners in Yemen, they named the jail under his name, and this man was a writer. They was beating him. But the criminals know. I remember that day when I was in the prison, I have nothing, I cannot contact anyone. And suddenly, some man came in, and he was like, I don't know, I was beaten to beat inside. And this guy, nothing, you know, like they was all respecting him, serving him, and I discovered he was a drug dealer. And the guys within the scene, they was drug dealing and they was having no weapons. And you know, they was serving him, and I was alone in the first day. And this man came and he spent a lot of money, a drug dealer and arm dealer. He had 3 persons, I remember them name by name. And then they bring them to the same cell where I was alone. And they was starting to cry to him. He said, don't worry, I was alone. I have no one to talk or ask about me, alone in another country. And this guy, it was good, like when he started to cry to his boss, I take my face to the other side, so I was me and the wall same. And then when they put me again with these criminals in that cell, you know, I was watching something like, I have no one to visit me, I have no one to ask about me. And this guy, just like, because I respected him that time, he sent me some food, so I'm now under his protection. They have like cigarettes, they have everything. And, you know, it was so funny that when you try to talk or to ask about lawyer or someone, no one will talk. But then I start to see they have even drugs. And they have like special drugs with couch shops, which is like, I was so scared, you know, to be around these people. But then I discovered those people was not the real criminals. You know, when I was there was a man from, I think he was like from Africa, I think Nigerian. And he was in the cell, and every night he stand up and he said, you know, like he was so scary. I was so scared. And the whole jail scared from him. And no one can talk with him. When they put us, you know, they think like, same colors, put them together. And then I start to speak with him in English. And the most important things in jail, to not get noticed. They will beat you, you know, like, if you see a thief in a bus. So imagine you are around 36 persons, all of them criminals, and you don't know, well, I am here. And this guy, I was sitting face to face, I see he's a student, and I start to speak with him in English. He answered. 35 persons in a cell, it's like, everyone is talking. And you are like, the most important to not get noticed. And then when I start to talk with him, everyone silent, look at me, to my eyes. And I say, like there was like a funny one, he was doing like, oh, black people can understand each other. You think it's by color, you know, communicating by color. And then they say, how you speak with him? And they say, he's like, they came to me and he was like chameleon, you know, I discovered the hieroglyph. And then the whole situation changed between the criminals. The same time when I was taken upstairs with the officer that was beating me, the question when my eyes was off, of I don't know who's talking to me, why did you go to the book fair? I said, here's a book fair. Had you go there? He said, no, in a very angry way. And then I realized, yes, the real things is happening, that what we understand. The one who beat you in jail, the one who tortured you in jail, he think he doing something good for the country. He think you know, like just he's infidel or just you are cheating for the, and he know nothing. He will beat you, and then he will go and eat his dinner. Nothing's happening. Not even any time questions. One of my friends, he been released, Sheikh Mukhaitar. He's a Mauritanian, you know, like they jailed him because he was writing, and now he's in France. He's so lucky to get out, you know, from death penalty. And he told me, like, when he is going outside, even his wife was against him. They should do that. What he did, nothing. Criminals, welcome. So, the most important things I was saying, like, when I was in jail, and I realized that I was there to be witnessing, I was there to write. But the issue, are we able to publish? Are we able to tell the stories? The next generation, you know, like how many stories now when you see in 2014 until now, it's 10 years or almost. How it's become like that. But imagine everyday crimes happening. News is focusing more about radicalism. But what about going out, telling the stories? We have no space. I've been released because there was someone hiding a phone in a place I will not tell where is it, but that phone saved my life. I have internet. I write like I'm in prison, and they saved my life. So imagine how many people is stuck. What I did after I go out, I searched about the witnesses. The witnesses I was interviewed, and one simple question: what kind of book you buy from the book fair? Imagine that, send you to jail. And then most of the witnesses, they are around in exile. I made a film, it's called Crime in a Book Fair, and I searched about them. The same person I was interviewing, he was a Yemeni person, we was in the book fair in Egypt, and we met again in Malmo book fair, and we did the interview there. They have to run away, not just from Egypt. They ran away from Yemen. When Houthis came, the leader of the Houthis was this Shi'i military group. It's like ISIS, but like Catholic, Protestant, something like that. So the first things he ordered, he said that the journalist, writer is the most dangerous than the one who holds weapons. I never have a gun in my life in Yemen. We are the second country full of weapons after America. I never have a gun. I never shoot with a gun. And if you have a guitar in your hand, they will say sorry. They will say you are gay or whatever. This shaming. But if you have a gun, you are a man. So, man is fighting with the words. How we can tell the people? How we can change this? How we can take these words? How we can make it now? We have social media. We have a lot of experience, and we have to tell the stories. But now we have more opportunities: films, documentaries, art, culture, plays. And now we have immigration, and it's really important to tell, now many of people who flee away from the country, but I will always say, I'm writing for you guys, but what about my people? We have to present, most of the media doesn't talk, if you have many of Syrian, many of Arabian speakers, they flee away, but you get the food, you get the shelter, but what about the media? It's still controlled. The media is still controlled. So you go, if you miss your country, if you go outside, you will miss your country, you will listen to your radio, you will listen to your music. It's the same. But can we produce something from here? Can we make art and culture from here? Are we able to survive? Are we survivors to able to write again, not be afraid? Because the most dangerous thing is to keeping us in jail in our minds. We are prisoner in our minds. We have the fear, we have the anger. So I'm trying to write, I'm trying to publish, I'm trying to make films, but can we go more and more and we get opportunities to publish these, to tell these stories, to be committed? At least if we cannot make a change right now, at least the second generation will give us excuse. Thank you.
May I just quote one short paragraph from your interview, because it's amazing. I was really touched with it. You said, "I still believe that no one can hurt me without my consent. I reminded myself to keep my authority and told myself that prison should not be the challenge for me. The real challenge would be the way I face prison itself."
Yeah, I'm going to tell a little bit different story. Really not very long. I try to make it short, I suffer pulmonary tuberculosis and another kind of biological condition, endometriosis. So at that time, my body weight was only 80 pounds, having 6 months consecutive fever. So the situation was pretty bad, and they sent me to, finally, they noticed I'm about to die in prison. That's why finally they sent me to prisons, to hospital, but they having so much afraid because of the, I think, PEN International and Amnesty International make my case pretty much aware. for the globe, so that's why they thought I'm the pretty much highlight cases. So they don't want me to be exposed to the general public. So within less than 20 hours, without having any treatment, even I couldn't be examined by the gynecologist, I was sent back to the hospital, to the prison. Then I warned the jail authority, from now on, the consequences, it's responsible to you, not to the medical officer, not to me. And then the medical officer of the jail authority, she is the wife of one of the military officers. She wants to be bribed by me. Since I didn't cooperate with her, she was pretty much trying to squeeze me. So as soon as I was sent back to my cell, they asked me to give up all the medicines I kept in my cell. Without any reason. No medical treatment, no examination, nothing. Even with that, I was asked to give up my medicines in my cell. So I declared hunger strike. And then all the jail authority came to see me. And then at that time I was literally very ill. I cannot even walk to the interview room to meet my parents. Someone needs to carry me because I couldn't even breathe if I need to walk some 100 meters distance. So because of the pulmonary tuberculosis and this serious illness. And then they asked me, what's your demand? And my demand is I want to change this medical officer who treating me because she's never been cooperated with me. It took me almost more than 1.5 months to get diagnosis. I already know I'm suffer pulmonary tuberculosis, something like that. So to make it short, some conversations has been going on. And during that conversation, I just mentioned, I asked the questions back to the jail authority. If you were told by your medical doctor, what will you do? And you're going to die in 6 months. And he just answered, oh, I will do whatever I want, something like that. I said, no, in my case, I want to change my medical doctor. Another medical doctor might tell me I can be treated or I can live more than 6 months, something like that. So in that case, I want to change this medical officer of the jail authority because she's never ever been cooperated with me. So after this very serious conversation, this jail authority officer told me, Madira, you are free. We are not. What that is mean? Up to 23 hours and 15 minutes, I was locked in this cell. Only 30 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening I was allowed to go outside to having shower and have a walk. How dare you say I'm free? And he said, you are free in your thoughts and words. We are the government servants, we are not. So I think that's why as long as we practice our rights to freedom of expression, rights to keep our free speech, there is some way to prove that freedom is by our own choice. And it's so many incidents, I can say, And of course, I smuggled in some the papers and the pens, and I wrote some pieces and I smuggled out through the help of some guards. And after I was released, it took me another almost 10 years to write down my prison memoir. And in that case, on contrary, my colleagues, he's also the former president of PEN Myanmar after my days. He also spent 12 years in prison, and most of the time they smuggled in the shortwave radio. And every week they publish a magazine, a journal, written with not the pen, with the sharp object onto the plastic page. All the news from BBC, VOA through this little shortwave radio they smuggled in. They call this radio parrots. Then they circulating this, and for that reason they were sentenced for another 7 years, 5 years, etc., etc. So I can say, yeah, there is a way if we willing to do something freely. So, and then my prison memoir was published first time in 2012 after they relaxed all the censorship, and it has been published so many times. And recently, after 2021 coup, right now more than 20,000 people become the prisoner of conscience in prisons all over the country, in my country. And recently, some young activists has been released from prisons, and they have been contacted me, and such a wonderful feeling to me. They just mentioned, your prison memoir helps us a lot, and not many young activists are well read, and they are just with their emotion against the military. They were caught and arrested and put in prison, but they have no idea how they should deal with the prisons, daily prison life. But in that case, we give your book, and after reading your book, they becoming part of our team to keep even the activist activity inside the prison. They dare enough to do with the help of this prison memoir. That's why I still believe the role of the literature, that the way I wrote this, my prison memoir, is just pure the memoir, you know. So it's the literature, role of the literature and role of the writers, and the way we practice our rights, the freedom to speech, freedom of expression. It's very much value in the sense of the, not at the present, nor in the past. It's also for the future. You know, that's why these young activists, he just told me, okay, we just first give your prison memoir and then your collection of your political essay. After that, we can make sure, even though we are not monitoring them, even though they were sent to other prisons, they keep doing the activities inside the prison. This is the most achievement I ever have, this kind of hearing. Yeah.
Now my question is about the displacement. Molim te Željka, prevedi. Pitala bih ju kako se osjećala kad je promijenila sredinu, na koji način je to utjecalo na njeno pisanje i kako je općenito, koji žanrovi su se pojavili u jednoj sredini, koji u drugoj, i da li je bilo teško živjeti u potpuno različitim okolnostima.
Nuevas circunstancias y ¿qué era lo más difícil para ti en tu escritura y en tu vivir en otro país?
Bueno, seré breve porque realmente esta respuesta la tenemos desde antes de salir de Cuba.
Pero esta respuesta la tenemos. Before with that.
Sí, nuestro mayor miedo realmente, más que la prisión dentro de Cuba, es el exilio.
The worst fear that you have in Cuba when you're in jail is to be exiled.
Porque en estos regímenes totalitarios pierdes el capital político cuando te exilian.
Because in these totalitarian regimes, they lose the political capital when you are sent to exile.
Por tanto, dejamos de tener una función, o sea, la función por la que hemos estado trabajando.
So because we stop having the function for which we were working before.
Desde afuera, bueno, tratamos de seguir visibilizando los casos.
Yeah, so from the outside we try to continue visibilizing the cases of people suffering in our countries.
Pero siempre hemos tratado de correr los límites dentro de Cuba al punto de yo misma querer estar presa.
Yeah, we have been trying to push the limits inside Cuba, even to the point that Catherine would have even preferred to be in jail than outside.
Un poco continuando con lo que contaban, eso que te da fuerzas, ¿no?
Yeah, following what we have been hearing here on the table is what gives you strength to continue.
En las prisiones de Cuba, el prisionero más respetado por el resto de los prisioneros dentro de la cárcel es el prisionero político.
Yeah, in Cuba, the most respected prisoner inside the jail by the rest of the prison is the one who is the political prisoner.
Porque los prisioneros están conscientes de el coraje y la locura que se necesita para cometer tal crimen.
Because those that are in jail, they know the courage and the madness that is needed to be there.
Los prisioneros han estado, digamos que, surfeando, o sea, cogiendo esos tangentes, ¿no? Dentro del sistema, dentro del status quo. Sin embargo, esta persona ha cometido el peor crimen, que ha sido querer cambiarlo.
Yeah, because they are being prisoners being served inside the system, but they have been accused of the worst crime, which is trying to change the system.
Así que, no sé, realmente es una tesis que defendemos mucho una vez que ya estamos como en esa línea de fuego.
So this is something that we defend when we arrive to that line of to that position to criticize the regime in that way.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
I would like to ask you, how did you cope with your displacement, and how did it influence your writing? What have you had to change in the meantime?
Well, the first thing I have to say is that when I was in jail and when I left my country in 1974, I did not consider myself right. I was writing, but without the consciousness of being right, which is good. But because you don't have something to do because you are a writer, it's not a mass that is imposing you. You simply write. So when I left the country, I was condemned to previously 10 years of jail, and then that was changed for 6 years of extrañamiento, so in Spanish that is extradite or expelled out of the country for 6 years, which, by the way, they not even comply with the sentence because I was kept outside my country for 10 years. But anyway, the first feeling is when I took the plane from Santiago. I was going to Norway, which was a country that received me as an exile. And that was a long, long way. I went from Santiago to Uruguay, from Uruguay to São Paulo in Brazil, from São Paulo to Monrovia to Zurich, from Zurich to Copenhagen, from Copenhagen also. So when I left Chile, the first thing is you see is the mountains. And I had this strange feeling of being very happy for the fact that the jail was behind. But I was very sad in a way because of my country, my family was with us and not with me in the plane. When I arrived to Norway, everything was different. To start with the language. Thanks God, 99% of Norwegians they speak English. So I had no problems of communicating with people. But in spite of it was spring the beginning of spring in Europe, it was dark, very dark, and it was cold. Norwegians were very happy because they were, you know, they were enjoying the spring. That's great. For me, it was, you know, well, it took time to get accustomed to new things and etc. Well, the first thing that they did was they took me to an hospital to check everything. I was there for recovering. I was weighing 42 kilos when I left Chile. So, and I had several bones broken. In the hospital, the surgeon told me, well, we have two possibilities. So we broke again the bones and put it together, or we can go through acupuncture. I didn't know what that was, but I said, that's the one I want. And it worked. Here I am, again. So that was the first shock with the country. Because it's a big difference between one that is expelled from the country and going to exile because it's forced to leave. So you do not arrive there, here I am in the marvelous country of freedom and liberty. It's not that feeling. It's different when maybe when you migrate, it's because of, it could be for economic reasons or other reasons that you go to, but you go with the hope, with the idea of something is waiting for you and you can have a better life. Nothing for me was a better life in Norway, which I pay today because I didn't enjoy Norway in the way I should have enjoyed. I came back many years after to Norway, and it's a country that really I love, because I'm much more mature now, I hope, to understand what all the things are and how the people, the Norwegians are very, they're not outspoken, they're not Latins, but when you have a Norwegian friend, that friend's forever, and that's very important. So that, it took me time for learning. Now, going to the fact of I started writing, I continued writing things for myself that I was always hiding because I was ashamed of showing this. For me, a revolutionary was supposed to do the revolution and not to write poems. So it was like being out of place if I was sharing with my friends, those that have been through the same experiences I had, saying, no, when I'm free time I write. But then it took time until I arrived into Italy, 3 or 4 years after, and then there was a national contest of poetry. I presented my work there. Well, I had to translate it into Italian. I presented my work there without any hope. The only thing I wanted is to have those poems translated in Italian, so I could drink with my friends and read poems in another. That was my purpose with that. But I wanted the contest, and then I became a poet because of it. And until today, I have the same thing, and I feel myself as a writer. So what I was doing there. I don't know how to say it in English, vomitar desde las vísceras el dolor acumulado. How do you say that? Well, anyway, it's like vomit from the inside, the pain that you have. That's the need, that's why I write. But instead of writing, and I don't know what happened, but instead of writing of pain, I wrote of hope. And that is, I think, the highest value of my writings. It's not to be, in a way, I could have stayed saying how terrible the life was because of this experience, but the idea was exactly was a denunciation of that, but in the name of hope, in the name of future. And that is something that even today, for me, it's easier to write out of pain than out of joy. Despite the fact that I think, a couple of poems out of joy. Thanks.
What a beautiful answer to my question. And now I'm going to ask all of you the same question. I will ask you if you see solutions locally, if you see solutions globally, and what are the points where you can still think and act with optimism? Is there hope? And if so, how can a better society be built? Now we start with you until my colleague translates the question.
Well, I think I still not see myself as writer in exile yet, because I still want to go back home, and I'm still struggling to keep my, not just the national identity, but also the writer's identity. I think I left, this is the longest time ever I kept away from my country, and it has been more than 2 years already. And the first 1.5 years I was pretty much living with the survivor guilt. A lot of people dying and facing all the problems in my country, why I'm pretty much easy with light and with so many privilege. But finally I wrote the new book, and I after starting writing it and after finishing it, I pretty much happy with the result, because I think I might be struggling to write this book. That's why I think the uttermost desire of a writer is to write a book, to write things, something. So sometimes the external environment cannot help us to vomit either our words of pain or joy, That's the very difficult situation. That's why I think the living in the survival guilt or living in the very dire situation, making us pretty much very difficult to vomit, very difficult to take out, Then after some times, but I think that's why I think that globally the act of our PEN International, the solidarity movement and the other protection of not just the people but also the rights of them, it's very, very much important. And on the other hand, I think I already have a sense of the displacement, something like that, and I can totally understand. The most important thing is not just simply physical freedom, because I was a little bit happy when I was sentenced 20 years, because I am hoping to write the prison memoir. Then I now have a chance to write prison memoir. So for that reason, I think what we were looking for is not just physical freedom. What we were looking for is the intellectual freedom and the other freedom to write, freedom to express, wherever we are, That's why I think the integration into the new society is very much important for everyone, not just for writers. For writers, it's more than that. I know writer is more deeply pretty much engaged into the not just to the humanity, but also to the society. But for the average persons, the true freedom is either physical or psychological or intellectual. Without these three freedoms, people cannot survive as a normal human being. That's very important. That's why I think either individually or institutionally or internationally, we should guarantee all freedoms to every single person. As organizations of PEN International, our priority is not just writers, but also everyone who practice freedom of expression. That's our aim, So that's why I think it's very important job we are doing.
Hace 4 años en Cuba no existía la protesta en las calles.
4 years ago in Cuba, it was not possible to protest in the streets.
Y justamente en el 2020 yo y unos amigos nos acuartelamos dentro de una casa y hicimos huelgas de hambre y de sed.
Until the day they got together with a group of friends and they got together in a house and started the first protest.
Estábamos protestando porque el régimen metió preso a un rapero impunemente.
Yeah, that was a protest because the regime had put in jail, how do you call it, rapper? Yeah, a rapper, singer.
Esto en otro momento hubiese quedado totalmente impune, o sea, nadie hubiese salido a protestar, se hubiesen conformado con la encarcelación de esta persona.
This was absolutely unusual and everybody would have been taken as normal, the fact that this musician would have been taken to jail.
Pero algo se activó en nosotros para decir en ese momento basta.
But that's something happened inside them that they decided to say stop it.
Y esto desencadenó una ola de protestas en todo el país que al día de hoy son las mayores protestas que han sucedido en Cuba.
And this was the starting point for all the protests that were taking place all over Cuba, and that have been the most significant one since up to date.
Esto significa que cualquier cosa que podamos hacer, las otras personas están mirando.
So this means that everything that we can do, that other people is watching us.
Porque esas otras personas están sufriendo y están viviendo exactamente lo mismo que nosotros.
Because of other people are suffering and living, passing through the same things that we are living.
So, uno no puede esperar al acompañamiento y la solidaridad. Uno tiene que hacer las cosas.
You cannot wait for solidarity. You have to do things immediately.
Y esto, inevitablemente, puede traer el resto de las cosas.
And that will bring all the other consequences.
Thank you very much.
Same question for you. Is there a hope? And if so, how can a better society be built?
Always there is a hope. You know, as I say, when I was there, I have no one call me and I have no access. A man came and bring this small, I still remember this, was a small Nokia phone, have internet, he take it, sorry to say that, but sometimes shitty place can bring you hope. This is where the phone was came out from. I was sitting and someone next to me, literally, he take a phone from his ass. Sorry, that's the truth, in jail. And then I had no hope. So imagine you find someone next to you, criminal, he say, do you want to call someone? And you know, like, and then I don't remember anything, no number, nothing. And I just checked and there was like, it was like colored Nokia small one and have internet. I go to Facebook, I write, I'm prisoner in the station number 2, Nasser City in Cameroon, and then everyone know about it, everyone talk about it, and then the police after that came and they search and they take everything. But I remember the things were being tortured, like after that I've been beaten, I've been taken to hospital, you know, like my nerve, my muscle, until now I still face it. But the worst thing, when I released from the jail, from that, and then returned to Yemen, which is like 2014, I returned to Yemen, I just start to stand up again to myself, I start to freelancing again, all the job, all the contracts I had, it was deleted. There was even like SMS service, we almost launching for culture and art, they say, sorry, we cannot work with you. We was working in a project with, it was like the British Embassy, about awareness campaign about, you know, like this is the bomb in the street, and they say we cannot go directly, we need the government to be involved. And everything was out. And then imagine worse than this, to be working for 6 years with a state. And then the war started, the Houthi came, and I still remember when someone called me and he said, I saw your name, you are in the list, you have to fly out. The 8 of journalists they just released a couple weeks ago, I was number 9. If I didn't get that, he said already enough for to get an agent. And I remember that I was going in the airplane, and they still, I thank this lady, I don't know her, old woman, and one man came and he said, Firas, where are you going? He said, to medical. And this lady said, oh, what do you want from him? She pushed him away. And this was the only airplane going to Jordan. After that, 6 years of running away from Jordan to Malaysia until I came to Switzerland as the guest writer with the PEN Center. And when I was writing the pain, you know, like also Sandra here sent her my greetings, she was translated. And you know, like when you are writing, I delete a lot of things. I was so afraid to write and delete, and I had short time. But then, what we are writing is, and I did something really important. Always I remind myself, from a really bad situation, what can you do? What can you change? Always, you know, the story of Red Cross. We all know the Red Cross. He came and see a lot of people dead. But he take an action. I think we can take an action. And I remember, and you said it, when I go out, we are free, but they are still there. They are still there as hostages. They are hostages in their own life, but without clubs, they are torturing themselves every day by beating us. A man will beat you without no reason. He has something wrong in his life. And I think one day, you know, when Nelson Mandela was released, and they saw that the guard, you know, everyone knows the story, he was shaking, and he was already president, and he invited him to eat with him. So, we don't want to revenge in a way fighting, no. Our revenge is writing and tell the people we can change, we shall change, and we have to take an action. Always I say, when you feel really bad today, remember where I was yesterday. So 6 years with a stick, but I'm walking now today. Thank you. And I hope for the future we are keeping, and we are here today. So thank you everyone, and merci.
Thank you very much. I hope it hasn't been tiring for you, because it's emotionally imbued, and it has its value that we share, and we are like a family here, most of us are from the PEN circles. So the last question I have is for Emma, is about the connection between Writers for Peace Committee, because you didn't answer me that question, and Writers in Jail Committee, because it's connected to the question of hope and how to make a better society in future, if it's possible, of course. So please.
I'm not going to skip this time. Going one step backward, but I come back to your question. For me, it's very important that the moving element for writing is utopia. And utopia is that thin line between the sea and the sky joining. And when you start swimming towards that line, you realize that the line is moving with you. So you will never reach that. And that's, for me, it's hope. And it's the same hope that we have to have in a committee, the one I'm chairing, which is the Writers for Peace Committee of PEN International, to have that hope that we should never stop, despite the fact that maybe we won't be able in our lifetime to reach a peaceful situation in the world, because this world, unfortunately, has never faced a peaceful situation all over the planet. So that's the challenge that we have. And if we're not those that are taking with us the hope for the future, and that small things can change, nothing will change, and not only that, things will get worse. If, for example, Catherine has not done what she did in Cuba, most probably the Cuban regime will continue for many, many, many more years with the same atrocities against the freedom of expression in Cuba. And the same is valid for Yemen, the same for Myanmar, the same for Chile. And let me finish to express also my concern for what's going on in the rest of the world. I'm very much concerned with the rightist turn that this world is moving towards. That in the name of democracy, because we have not been able to take care of our democratic systems enough, we run the risk to go back to terrible times that humanity lived here in Europe from 1933 to 1945.
It's been really a privilege to be among you tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, for giving your advices on the future hope of making a better world, of having your courage, intellectual courage, and your solidarity kept even in worse times. And now I think that could be an ideal conclusion for our little round table. We have a little bit of food over there. I'm not sure that it's already prepared, but anyway, if there is somebody from the family, you can ask the question, or two. Yeah, please.
It's all right. My voice is loud enough. I don't need to. Herman, you said this fighting against the madness, the loneliness in prison. And I remembered that Milovan Djilas, one of the great critics of Stalinism, when he was in prison, he translated on toilet paper Paradise Lost. And I'm very interested in this connection that writers have with other writers when they're in prison. And I wanted to ask each of you, which writers came to you in your solitude? Who would you have translated if you had toilet paper and enough time? Because it seems to me that's a very pen-centered idea, that this communication of writers across languages and cultures and even centuries.
That brings me a memory of when we were in isolation cells, all together with what I saw when they opened the door, I could see that. And from there we had the guards. And someone, I don't know how, brought one book, The Exorcist. Which certainly was not the best book to get in jail. But somehow, someone broke the pages of the book and separated the book in chapters. So you ask for, give me chapter 1. So you read them, and then you were listening to others shouting, about requesting the different chapters. And that book was read by, I don't know, of all of us, but it was an example of how literature can decide. That's that one thing. When we had the possibility, after we were in a common sense already, we had the possibility of the university send books to the jail. And, but they admitted a few ones that were very leftist books. One was called The Blood and the Hope. And that got in. Another one about the revolution of Cubism was not accepted. So we had this, thanks to the ignorance of the guards, we were able to get some literature. So some exercise of that kind was done inside, and that was good. But the problem was that you could ask for. So if I wanted to read Solzhenitsyn, even if the military then would love to give me a book by Solzhenitsyn, that was not possible. There was nobody to ask for that. So we were just limited to those things. So we started to get together in the afternoon before we were sent inside the cells in small groups to tell stories or repeat stories that we have read in other books, and that was the way the literature was present. From the point of view of poetry, I was always missing Neruda. For me, for my generation, Neruda is the most influential poet because he was Chilean, so we were raised with Pablo Neruda, but nothing was, it was impossible to have a poem of Pablo Neruda inside the jail. So sometimes there were a couple of guys who had a good memory, and they were able to repeat verses from Neruda. So that was a way of receiving this needed input for that. But what I want to express to you is that inside a jail, you are alone with yourself, thinking of your own dreams, thinking of your own poets, of your own favorite writers, and having access to some kind of literature is not all what you would like to be gotten with. But that is a way of helping in the survival process of facing the difficulties that you are living. So it's a way of evading the situation that you're living in the jail, and literature is the best way of doing it.
Still, I need your help because I'm asking you the same question the gentleman asked about what was whose literature came to your mind when you were in confinement. Si estuvieras en
realmente me iría mucho más por este tipo de literatura apocalíptica.
She would like to go more for apocalyptic kind of literature.
Por eso creo que necesitas un buen libro para leerse prisión.
That's why you need a good book.
Pero, o sea, normalmente, o sea, nunca he estado en esta situación y no me la he imaginado, porque siempre he estado presa dentro de mi propia casa y tengo siempre mi biblioteca conmigo.
She has not been through that experience because she was not in a proper jail, and the place where she was in jail was her home, and there she had her own literature.
Pero en el tiempo que mi pareja estuvo preso en la cárcel de mayor seguridad de la seguridad del Estado.
Well, when my couple was in jail because of the security of state also.
La seguridad del Estado me dejó llevarle unos libros.
And the security allowed me to take to my couple some books.
Recuerdo que le envié dos libros que me encantan, y uno era de Iluminaciones, Rambo, y Manhattan Transfer.
What's it?
Manhattan Transfer.
I don't know. Illuminations is the title. Yeah.
Rambo, Manhattan Transfer. O sea, cuando Hamlet, mi pareja en ese momento, lo encarcelaron, resulta que nunca se leyó esos libros.
When he was arrested with a couple, he had never read those books before.
Decían que, o sea, lo hundían demasiado, entonces prefería leerse los libros del otro preso, que eran libros de aventura.
So he preferred to read the books of the other guy who was in jail with him, that were adventure books.
Y bueno, realmente, o sea, depende mucho, ¿no? De la experiencia hacia dónde quieras ir, ¿no? Yo creo que, no sé, Robinson Crusoe sería lo que más yo leería.
It depends on your own experience. She thinks that Robinson Crusoe would be the one that you would prefer to read in that situation.
Face in the war, something like that. So that also helped me to keep looking in the eye what's going on outside war, not the outside of the prison wall, but outside of my country, something like that. So that's also somehow helping me. But if I can get a chance, I prefer to read, either autobiographical books or poetry or some pretty much thought-provoking fictions, novels. That's all. Not particular person, but at the time I am open to any.
Actually, for me, I had nightmares, but I was seeing myself outside of the cell. But the things, we had a debate actually, when we was first we was with the criminals, and then they separate us, like the political and the students in the same cell. But it was, actually I was preferring the criminals because they put us with some radicals, and we had some Christian guy where he's actually, he was beaten because he's Christian inside with the criminals, but they don't know anything from the religion. But when he put with the religious radicals, and someone, he wants him to become oh, your religion is wrong. And the guy said, bro, we are in jail, not in debate. And then I stand up to fight for this guy, and then I was doing the debate. I have a lot of, knowledge from the religion side. I came from, conservative family, but I'm a free thinker. But imagine you facing all of them, and then we made the debate, and they put me, and they put this radical guy face to face. I won the conversation. I was actually saying that, and then what they do is this man, they say, he's a Shia. So they are all Salafis and Sunnis. So when he loses, he say, I'm Shia. So someone came to me and he say, pray on the Prophet. So the way to know the Sunni from the Shia, the way how they pray for the Prophet and his family. So I start to pray for all prophets around the world except the prophet he asked for. And then I make him crazy, and then one he can say, that's it's enough here. But I get beaten after that. But for me, I wasn't thinking, I was just only thinking about to write something. I was writing, and then we was writing what happening is daily, but then also we was breaking a little bit of pieces from the window. So we have it as a memories, and we was always smuggling and going, but to get the paper, it was really hard. But they was taking the drugs, and someone had the plate, shoving plate in his mouth. That's okay for them, but for us, the paper was the dangerous things. So I always try to remember the funny part, because we saw a lot of things, but it's good to remember the good parts from it, the funny part, so we don't get affected.
Thank you so much. That would conclude our evening, and now please go and share a couple of words more in the lobby while waiting for the food. And I hope that you enjoy this evening at least as much as I enjoyed it, and at least as much as I felt it to be a privilege to sit among you and to help you to say some of the things that maybe you wouldn't say if it wouldn't be a family like this, because it was emotional, it was open, it was full of wit, and it was clever at the same time, and I'm so grateful that it happened to me and it happened to us here. Thank you.